Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Eluveitie and out April 25th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 12 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 9th full-length studio album. They are a Swiss folk metal band. Listening to this album from start to finish allows you to see two different views of what the record offers and what the record gives. At the first glance for me, at my first experience going through it, I felt like the album was actually pretty cohesive and it offered a very compact experience with a lot of changes, a lot of ebbs and flows. There are certain tracks within this record that work like interludes that allow you to see the correlation between songs and makes the overall flow of the album feel a little bit more together, still giving a great experience all around and making the album as a whole really shine and bring all of its great qualities to the surface. But the more that I listen to the record, the more I find this album to be more about the individual songs and definitely having more of an individualistic nature. I think you can change the track listing around a lot and you don't really lose much from what the album overall offers. And I think that comes perhaps from the sound. The heaviness of the sound becomes a little bit of the glue that holds it all together, regardless of the different influences and the different journeys that each and every single song gives you. So it's an album that has two perspectives, but I definitely feel like this album has so much strength on the individual basis of each and every single song that the overall collective is just the result of it. As far as the sound goes, I mentioned already that cohesiveness of heaviness that this album has, and all around this is a very heavy album, very consistent from that standpoint. It doesn't mean that every single song on the record is going to be a heavy track. There are a few that lose a little bit of that heaviness, gain a little bit more melody, gain a little bit more of a folk experience, and definitely take the album on slight different detours. But that is important as well. You don't want an album that's too uniform across each and every single song. You definitely want some peaks surrounded by some deep valleys, and this album definitely offers that experience. But when you get to the end of the record, I think you're going to forget a little bit more about those valleys, about those moments of clarity, those more cleaner songs, those more folkier songs, and I feel like you're definitely going to concentrate a lot more on the overall heaviness of the album. Now, within that heaviness, there's still room for folk elements. The production of this album did a great job as far as matching those two experiences together. Not equally together as far as the sound is concerned, allowing the heaviness of the record, the drums, the guitars, and in some cases the vocals to be a little bit higher, to be a little bit more in the forefront, so that the listener gets hit with that first and foremost, and then mixing in the more folky side underneath it and even intertwine with it in a way that becomes a little bit more of a nuance. It becomes a little bit more of a different texture within the overall heaviness of the album. I like this approach because you're still able to include a huge part of the DNA of the band, that folky side of the band, but you're also able to create a much heavier album all around. And I think it's been quite a bit of time, quite a few records since we've had an album this heavy from Eluveitie. So taking this approach allows them to continue what they have done from more of a folkier side of their sound, but also bring back a little bit of that heaviness that was there, perhaps in the earlier albums, a little bit more defined on this record as well. So I really like this combination and I really like this overall mix. Now within the sound, I want to mention the guitars and I want to mention the folk elements a little bit deeper. I'll go a little bit more into detail on those two because I really find that they are the two reflections of the dichotomy of the album. The guitars on this album sound phenomenal, perhaps one of the most guitar-driven records by the band in a very long time, and that's where that heaviness also comes into play. You could technically have a guitar-driven, guitar-focused record without necessarily making it heavy, but this one is both. It's heavy, it's driven, and really becomes the catalyst on almost every single song on where the tracks are going. I enjoyed some of the solos that they added on the record, really adding some melody and some clarity to the guitar sound so that you don't start to see the guitars just one-dimensional throughout the album. I think this is an important element. And then you have the folkier side of the record, which I thought was perhaps a little bit more subdued, a little bit more controlled than what we've seen in previous albums, but it doesn't lose anything, it doesn't lose any quality, and it's not diminishing that specific portion of their DNA. These two elements are really important on this record, and they're important for different reasons, and they're showcased in two very different ways. Once you move into the vocals, you're going to get a phenomenal performance from Fabienne. I don't think you could expect anything else. Her voice is tremendous, and this record gives her some moments to shine. There's some tracks that are really her tracks. All Is One is definitely one of those songs. It's really her voice dominating the essence of the track and becoming the main focal point of the song. And then you have Kriegel's harsh vocals that for a record that is this heavy also works really well. The dynamic between the two is really interesting because you're going to have songs just with Kriegel on vocals, or at least predominantly on vocals with the harsh vocals in the forefront, and then you're going to have some songs with Fabienne in the forefront and him a little bit more in the background or not there at all. So there is a nice exchange of roles in terms of who does what on which song, but all of them are in the right place at the right time in order to give the songs what they need. In the tracks where you have both of them, I also appreciated them changing and alternating styles and ideas and where to place the vocals, so that you don't have the same pattern song in and song out. That would make the album very repetitive and mundane, in my opinion, from a vocal standpoint. So changing the two, putting one in the verses, one in the chorus, and changing them around, then using one in the forefront, the other one as backing vocals, and so forth and so forth, it makes the album a lot richer from that standpoint, and it makes the overall vocal performance a lot more impactful. It's fun to say that this band has been around for such a long time, and they've been very consistent in what they've done. Obviously, from record to record, they're changing and evolving and adding elements, and perhaps putting some elements more in the forefront than others. But I feel like this record, 6 years after their latest album, it still shows how consistent they are as a band. It still shows all the quality that they have, and I think it was time for a very heavy album by Eluveitie, and this album from that standpoint checks all the boxes. As far as favorite songs goes, I want to start off with Taranoías. Heavy, really heavy song. Not the heaviest song on the record, but definitely a heavy track. The folk elements are more layered into that overall heaviness that this song has. This gives more texture to the track, but it doesn't diminish the overall heaviness that the song provides. Kriegel's harsh vocals work as well in order to enhance that heaviness, specifically when it comes to the verses. The verses of the song is perhaps the heaviest portion of the track, and then you have the more melodic chorus with Fabienne's vocals in the forefront, Kriegel as a backing vocalist a little bit underneath her, so you still have a sense of continuation of heaviness from verses to the chorus on a vocal standpoint, but then you have a change in terms of the melodic side musically, and then Fabienne up front really defining that melodic side and changing the dichotomy between verses and chorus, creating definitely a riff between the two, but creating those internal ebbs and flows that any song really needs to have in order to drive the experience home. I also like the fact that the chorus, while being overly melodic, it's not overly folky. The folky elements on this track are actually more noticeable in the heavier side of the song, which is the verses, and a lot less predominant in the more melodic side of the chorus. This is an interesting duality that I think it worked really well, and it allowed them to then insert a piece following the second verses, which is a very folky solo, for lack of a better term. You can call it bridge. I call it solo because that's probably the spot where you could easily insert a guitar solo, and they went more with a folky experience in order to give that track a little bit more exposure to that side of the sound that up until that point was just really a layer within the song. Then we have what I consider to be the heaviest track on the record, The Harvest. This is a super heavy, super driven song, and it's perhaps even heavier because it's Kriegel on vocals, harsh vocals, from beginning to end. Towards the end, there are some vocals in the background that bring a different experience to the track, that bring a lighter experience to the track, but they're just there really for textured and to add a few layers to what that vocal performance could be. Because overall, it's really his song, and he delivers a great performance from start to finish, and his heaviness of vocals matches perfectly with the overall heaviness that the song has, both in the verses and in the chorus. Is a track that musically and vocally, while not being linear, is as linear as you get, because that sense of heaviness never really slows down. The solo that they add on this track is a short solo, but it has a little bit of brightness, has a little bit of an old school approach. It adds to the overall consistency of the song, and it's a great track all around, feeling very complete. Still has some folky elements in it, but they're really diluted in the sound experience, allowing that heaviness to come to the forefront unstopped. Last but definitely not least, All Is One. This is a pure ballad, and I love this ballad for two reasons. One is the song where Fabienne gets to shine. It's her track, it's her performance. She's the one that's going to drive you. She's the one that you're going to connect with from beginning all the way to the end. Then the ballad is really built in order to be built up to pieces. So the first verses are really stripped down with her voice in the forefront, allowing you to immediately connect to her, because she's going to be your guide through the rest of the song. As the track progresses, as it moves into the chorus, second verses, chorus, the track gains momentum sound-wise. You start to see more layers being added on. The guitars come in, the drums come in, the folky elements were always there. So you start to see things being added to it, but it never adds to the point where the song becomes heavy or very robust. The song always feels overly melodic, it always feels stripped down even when it's not. And then closing off the track with the same melody that the track opens up, but now having that folky essence coming in into full range, into full perspective, really is the cherry on top of a phenomenal ballad that this record offers to the listener. This is it. Eluveitie with Env, out April 25th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.